Nobody expected the sous-chef to save Adrienne Colquhoun's life. Least of all Adrienne herself. The executive team at Vos Meridian had a private physician on retainer, a nutritionist flown in from Geneva twice a month, and a medical suite on the 14th floor that cost more to maintain per year than most Canadians earned in a decade. What they did not have, what nobody thought to arrange, was someone who understood that the woman slowly disappearing in front of them was being poisoned by the very hands meant to feed her. Laurel Finch had been working in the Vos Meridian kitchen for 11 months when she first noticed something wrong with Mrs. Colquhoun. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't announce itself. It was the kind of wrong that hides in plain sight, tucked between ordinary things, the way a shadow falls slightly off angle on a clear afternoon, and you can't explain why it unsettles you, only that it does. Laurel noticed it on a Tuesday, the way she noticed most things, quietly, without drawing attention to herself. She had spent 7 years training in professional kitchens, 2 in Montreal under Chef Beausoleil, 3 in Vancouver at a Michelin-recognized restaurant that no longer existed, and the last 2 navigating the particular brutality of private household cooking for the ultra-wealthy. She had learned somewhere in that time that people in powerful households did not like being observed. They liked being served. Those were different things entirely. So she had trained herself to look without appearing to look, to register without reacting, to file information away in the quiet part of her mind that she reviewed later, alone, when she was prepping mise en place at 6 in the morning and the rest of the house was still sleeping. That Tuesday, Adrienne Colquhoun had sent back her lunch untouched for the 3rd time in 8 days. This was not on its own unusual. Adrienne was a careful eater, deliberate. She had specific preferences, no cream sauces, no red meat, lemon in everything, and she communicated those preferences through Mr. Thorne, the household manager, who communicated them to Laurel, who followed them precisely. The meals Laurel prepared were correct, nutritionally balanced, exactly what had been requested. But Adrienne wasn't eating them. More than that, she was losing weight in a way that didn't look like dieting. Laurel had seen dieting. She had cooked for women who tracked every gram and called it wellness. This was different. Adrienne's face had taken on a particular quality, a kind of translucence, like fine paper held up to a window. Her hands, when Laurel caught glimpses of them during service, had developed a faint tremor that hadn't been there in September. It was now December. Laurel filed it away, kept her head down, did her job. The Vos Meridian estate sat 40 minutes outside of Ottawa, on a private road that wasn't on any map. The main house had 11 bedrooms, a staff wing with 6 more, a heated outdoor pool that nobody used, and grounds that stretched toward a frozen lake the color of pewter. In winter, the whole property had a quality of enforced silence, like the world had agreed to hold its breath. Laurel had taken the position because it paid well, and because her previous employer, a technology executive in Toronto, had let her go without reference after she'd reported his wife's suspected disordered eating to a medical professional. She'd lost a year of her career over that. She was not, she told herself, going to make the same mistake twice, and yet, the man who owned all of this, the state, the company, the private physician, and the Geneva nutritionist, was Rémi Vos. Laurel had formed her first impression of Rémi Vos on her 3rd day of employment. When he had walked through the kitchen at 11 at night, without acknowledging her presence, opened the refrigerator, stared into it for 45 seconds without removing anything, and then left. She had revised that impression over the following months. Rémi Vos was 41 years old and had run Vos Meridian, a conglomerate with holdings in real estate, private security, and 3 other sectors that were never discussed openly. Since the age of 33, when his father had died under circumstances that the estate staff did not speak about directly, but referred to through a specific kind of careful silence. He was tall, dark-haired, with the kind of face that had been handsome in his 20s and had become something more severe with time. He did not smile often. He did not explain himself. He moved through his own household like a man who had long ago stopped expecting comfort from his surroundings and had made peace with that. His mother, Adrian Colquhoun had come to stay 6 weeks ago. Adrian Colquhoun was 67, sharp-minded, and had the bearing of a woman who had spent 40 years being the most capable person in any room she entered. She and Remy were, as far as Laurel could observe, not close in the easy way of some families. But there was something between them, a mutual gravity, a careful attention each paid to the other, that suggested a bond forged through difficulty rather than warmth. Adrian had come to stay because her own physician had recommended rest following a difficult autumn. That was what Mr. Thorne had said. He had said it in the particular tone he used when he was repeating the official version of something. Laurel had not asked for more. She should have left it there. She didn't. The thing that finally made Laurel move was not the weight loss, though that was worsening. It was not the tremors, though those were more frequent now. It was the smell. She discovered it on a Thursday evening when she was returning a serving dish to the butler's pantry and past the small sitting room where Adrian took her evening supplements. The door was slightly ajar. Through it came a faint, particular smell. Something chemical underneath, something herbal, the way certain cleaning compounds could be masked, but not fully eliminated by fragrance. Laurel had grown up on a farm outside of Sudbury. Her father had kept a working kitchen garden and a small greenhouse, and she had spent her childhood learning, among other things, what various compounds smelled like and what they did to living things. It was the kind of knowledge that urban kitchens never required, and that Laurel had never expected to use. She recognized that smell. She stood very still in the corridor for approximately 4 seconds. Then she walked back to the kitchen, set down the serving dish, and began washing her hands at the sink. She kept her face entirely neutral. She thought about what she had just recognized and what, if anything, she was going to do about it. She thought, "This is not your business," she thought. "You lost a year over the last time you interfered," she thought. "You could be wrong." She dried her hands on a clean towel, folded it precisely, and placed it on the rack. Then she began to think about who had access to Adrian's supplement routine. The supplements were purchased through a company called Norbridge Wellness, which supplied the estate on a monthly contract. They were ordered by Mr. Thorne. They were unpacked and organized by Petra, the household assistant, 24 years old, 3 months on staff, and they were administered, set out each evening on a small silver tray for Adrian to take herself, by a woman named Sylvie Renaud. Sylvie Renaud was 44, had been employed by the Voss household for 6 years, and held the title of personal attendant to Mrs. Colquhoun. She had come with the job, more or less. She had been on staff before Adrian arrived and had been reassigned to her care when it was determined that Mrs. Colquhoun would be staying for an extended period. She was quiet, efficient, and smiled at the right moments. She had, Laurel had observed, a particular quality of attentiveness toward Remy Voss that was slightly more attentive than professional courtesy strictly required. Laurel filed that away too. She could not prove anything. She was a sous-chef. She had no authority here, no standing to raise alarms, no way to access Adrian's medical records, or the supplement stock, or anything that would tell her whether her nose and her instincts and the slow, growing dread in her chest were telling her the truth. What she had was a kitchen. And a kitchen, she had learned, was one of the few places in a private household where a careful person could gather information without anyone thinking twice about it. Over the next 5 days, Laurel began paying a different kind of attention. She noted when Sylvie Renaud entered the kitchen and what she did there. She noted which supplements were stored where and when the stock was rotated. She began, with extreme care, to alter the timing of her evening prep so that she was working later. Not conspicuously late, just late enough to observe the 10 o'clock supplement routine from the kitchen pass-through, which had a sight line into the corridor outside the sitting room if the pantry door was left at the right angle. She saw Sylvie carry the tray to the sitting room on 4 consecutive evenings. On the 5th evening, a Wednesday, Sylvie was delayed. Miss Thorne had stopped her in the corridor about a scheduling matter. And Laurel watched through the pass-through as Sylvie turned her back to the camera, positioned in the east corner of the corridor, and did something to the tray she was carrying that took approximately 3 seconds and involved her right hand moving to her jacket pocket and then back. It was brief, it was subtle. If you were not already looking for it, you would not see it. Laurel saw it. She stood in the kitchen and felt the specific, cold clarity of being right about something she had desperately wished she was wrong about. She needed to move carefully. She had no allies here, no proof, and a complicated history of being dismissed. She also needed to move quickly, because whatever was happening to Adrian Colquhoun had been happening for weeks, and the woman was getting worse. She thought about who she could tell. Mr. Thorne? No. She didn't know enough about Mr. Thorne, and household managers in private estates tended to prioritize the household's reputation above all else. The private physician, Dr. Almeida, possibly, but Dr. Almeida had been examining Adrian for 6 weeks and had not raised concerns that Laurel was aware of. Either he hadn't noticed, or there was a reason he hadn't raised them. Neither option made Laurel feel better. The police. Yes, eventually. But she had a handful of observations, a smell she could not prove she had detected, and a 3-second clip of a woman adjusting something on a tray. That was not enough. Not for a household with this much money and this many lawyers, which left Remy Voss. Laurel had avoided Remy Voss for 11 months in the careful, professional way that good household staff avoided their employers, present when needed, invisible otherwise, no unnecessary conversations. She had exchanged perhaps 40 words with him directly. Most of those had been about food. She did not know what he would do with what she was about to tell him. She knew only that he was the one person in this household who had both the authority and, if her read of him was even partially correct, the particular quality of dangerous focus that would not be satisfied with a partial explanation or a reassurance. She caught him the following morning. He was in the East Library at 6:45 a.m., which was, she had learned through observation, where he spent the first 40 minutes of his day before the rest of the house was awake. She knocked twice, waited, and entered when he said nothing, because the silence had a quality that indicated she should. He looked up from whatever he was reading. He looked at her for a moment in the particular way he had of assessing a situation before committing to a response. "Finch," he said, "I need to speak to you about your mother," Laurel said. "I need you to listen to me before you respond, and I need you to understand that I'm telling you this at some personal risk, and I'm telling you anyway, because I believe someone in this house is making her sick." The quality of the room changed. Remy Voss set down what he was reading. He did not speak immediately, which was either a very good sign or a very bad one, and Laurel was not certain which. "Sit down," he said finally. She sat. She told him everything, in order, without embellishment. The untouched meals, the weight loss, the tremors, the smell in the corridor, the supplement routine, what she had observed on Wednesday evening through the pass-through. She told him about the smell from her childhood and what her father had taught her and why she believed what she was smelling was a specific class of compound that, in small repeated doses, could cause exactly the symptoms Adrian was displaying. She told him she could be wrong. She told him she didn't think she was. When she finished, Remy Voss was quiet for a long moment. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he said. It wasn't quite a question. "I didn't have anything concrete until Wednesday," she said. "I wasn't going to come to you with a feeling." He looked at her for another moment. "Who else have you told?" "No one." "You haven't taken anything from the supplement stock?" "No. I was afraid to, without your authorization. If someone is doctoring the supplements, disturbing them before you can have them properly tested might compromise the evidence." Something shifted in his expression. It was not warmth exactly. It was more like recalibration, the look of a man revising an assumption he hadn't realized he was making. "All right," he said. What followed happened with a speed and thoroughness that Laurel could only attribute to what it felt like to watch a very large machine shift into a different gear. Remy Voss did not call Mr. Thorne. He did not call Dr. Almeida. He made 2 phone calls from the library, in French, that Laurel did not entirely follow, and then he asked her to please return to the kitchen and proceed with her morning routine exactly as she normally would, and to speak to no one about this conversation. By 8:30, two men Laurel had never seen had arrived at the estate in an unmarked vehicle. By 9, a portion of the supplement stock had been removed from the storage area by those men without any visible disruption to the household routine. By 10, Dr. Almeida had been asked to present himself at the estate. Laurel did not know what happened in that meeting, but Dr. Almeida left 40 minutes later and did not return. She found out later that the supplements had contained a compound that was, in small doses, extremely difficult to detect and caused progressive neurological symptoms that mimicked the early stages of a degenerative condition. It was the kind of thing that a physician might note with concern and treat conservatively while further tests were conducted. Tests that could be delayed, extended, multiplied, while the underlying cause was never addressed. Adrienne Colquhoun, it turned out, was the majority stakeholder in a subsidiary of Voss Meridian that her son did not control. She had been in the process of restructuring her estate. If her health continued to decline, if she were eventually found to have a progressive condition that affected her judgment, certain decisions she was about to make could be challenged. Certain arrangements, beneficial to certain people, could be protected. Those certain people included Sylvie Renaud, who had been, for 2 years prior to her employment at Voss Meridian, in a relationship with a man named Cloutier, who sat on the subsidiary's board. That connection had not appeared in her employment references. It was not clear whether Mr. Thorne had known and said nothing, or had not known at all. Laurel was in the kitchen at 11:30 that morning, making stock when Remy Voss appeared in the doorway. He stood there for a moment, watching her work in the way he occasionally did, not intrusively, just with the kind of attention that suggested he was present rather than passing through. "Finch," he said. She set down her ladle. "Yes, my mother is going to be evaluated by a specialist this afternoon. A different specialist." He paused. "The compound in the supplements is consistent with what you described. You were right." Laurel nodded. She felt something release in her chest that had been clenched for the better part of a week. "I want to know," he said, "how a sous-chef knows what that compound smells like." "My father kept a greenhouse," she said. "He lost most of a growing season to misapplied chemicals when I was 11. I spent a summer learning exactly what each one of them smelled like and what they could do, because he said the best defense against making a mistake was knowing what the mistake smelled like before you made it." Remy looked at her for a moment. "Your father sounds like a practical man." He was. Another pause. The kitchen was quiet except for the soft sound of stock beginning to simmer. "You took a significant risk," he said. "Coming to me, given your previous situation." Laurel looked at him. "You know about that. I know about all the people I employ." He said it without apology, which she found, oddly, easier to receive than an apology would have been. "And I know that it cost you." "It would have cost more to say nothing," she said. He was quiet for another moment. "Then, what Sylvie Renaud did is going to be handled through the appropriate channels, properly, with documentation. Her connection to Cloutier is being reviewed. If there are criminal charges, and I expect there will be, the process will be transparent." Laurel nodded. "I want to make sure that's clear," he said, "because I imagine you've been in situations where things were handled in ways that weren't." She had. She'd heard enough, in enough kitchens, to know that households with money and lawyers could make problems disappear in ways that weren't always justice. "I appreciate that," she said. He nodded once. Then he looked at the stock on the stove, and something in his expression shifted. Not softening exactly, more like a very slight reduction in the careful distance he typically maintained. "She'll want soup tonight," he said, "if she's up to it. Something plain." "I know what she likes," Laurel said. He looked at her one more time, with the particular kind of attention that she had been the subject of for 3 minutes now, and that she was not entirely sure what to do with. "Yes," he said quietly, "I'm beginning to understand that." Then he left. Adrienne Colquhoun spent the next 3 days under the care of a specialist Remy had called in from Toronto. The specialist's assessment confirmed that the neurological symptoms were chemically induced, and fully reversible with appropriate treatment and removal of the causative agent. Within a week, Adrian was eating properly for the first time in months. The translucence had begun to leave her face. On the 8th day, Adrian came to the kitchen herself. She was still moving carefully, still conserving energy. But there was a quality of intention in the way she moved that had been missing for as long as Laurel had observed her. She sat down at the kitchen island. The first time Laurel had seen her in the kitchen at all, and looked at Laurel with the kind of direct appraisal that reminded her powerfully of her employer. "I'm told," Adrian said, "that you noticed something the doctor didn't." "I noticed something that seemed worth reporting," Laurel said carefully. Adrian made a small sound that might have been the beginning of a laugh. "You're modest. I'm careful. Those are different things." "Yes," Laurel said. "They are." Adrian looked at her for a moment longer. "My son is not an easy man to work for. He's been fair," Laurel said. "He has very few people he trusts," Adrian said. "He trusts the ones he's earned the right to trust, and he takes a long time earning it, and he doesn't talk about it. I want you to know that, so that you understand what it means when I tell you that he's asked to review your employment contract." Laurel kept her expression neutral. "To terminate it? To improve it," Adrian said, and this time the small sound was definitely something close to amusement. "Though knowing my son, he'll frame it as administrative." That afternoon, Mr. Thorne, who had been cleared of involvement and was now navigating his own complicated feelings about having been deceived in his own household, brought Laurel a folder with a revised contract. The salary was different. The terms were different. There was also, attached to the back, a handwritten note on plain paper that said, "Your father was right about knowing what a mistake looks like before you make it. So are you. R.V." Laurel read the note twice. She thought about 11 months of early mornings and careful observation, and the specific discipline of noticing without being noticed. She thought about what it cost to speak up, what it had cost her before, what it would have cost Adrian, and perhaps others, if she had kept her head down the way she had promised herself she would. She thought about a greenhouse outside of Sudbury and a summer spent learning the names of things. Then she picked up a pen and signed the contract, and went back to making soup, and the kitchen filled with the quiet, steady smell of something being slowly brought to warmth.